Hey Northstate, Chief Meteorologist Preston Donion here in the Weather Center, breaking down the full details of this nasty weather weekend that we're headed into. I know that there's so much to talk about, and I tried to pack it all in on daybreak this morning, but just so much to talk about that I thought we needed to give it a little extra time. So here I'm going to try and fly you through everything you need to know for the weekend, piece by piece, and hopefully keep this relatively quick, but also give you a chance to ask questions in the comments. Anything you're curious about, any impacts that you're seeing locally and what you want to know, throw that in the chat. So I'm going to flip you over to the computer now, and we're going to take a look at what we can expect out of this active weather pattern that's on the way. So as soon as I can get this to zoom in, that's my challenge. There we go. As soon as we zoom in, we're taking a look at our graphics and we're talking about this New Year nastiness. That's what I want to call this storm system because it really is some nasty, nasty weather to kick off the year. Rain impacts are going to be moderate to significant, right? You're going to see a lot of places over the weekend pack in maybe 2 to 3 inches of additional rain along the north coast. Maybe that's 3 or 4 inches. And that's just talking through your Sunday with some additional rain to follow. It's not crazy amounts, but it is still significant. So we're calling that kind of a moderate impact. Winds are going to be gusty and very widespread with those strong gusts up to about 50 miles an hour. And this is a fairly long period of strong winds, right? Those will pick up later tonight, carry into your Saturday. And so really all throughout Saturday, at least the first half of the day, from midnight on to the early afternoon, we are going to see that potential for 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts. So that's why we're putting that a little closer to the high end of the scale for wind. And then we do see a marginal risk for some severe thunderstorms out there on Saturday. And that's why I've got that also a little higher on the scale. Snow is going to pile up big time in the higher elevations, but we're going to keep this mainly isolated above our mountain communities. So that's why we're keeping that at about a moderate. Now, taking a look at that next weather maker, it is very obvious out over the Pacific. You can see that beautiful, beautiful spiral. Let me see if I can get my pointer going here. So you can see that tight spiral around this area of low pressure right here. So everything is flowing counterclockwise around that, and that is what's going to drive this moisture into the state, right? Your low is going to move in a little closer. So all of this is going to be pumped into the northern half of California tonight into tomorrow. Apologies for the shaky camera there. But we're going to see that big time impact overnight into your early Saturday. That's going to be the time frame for the heaviest rain. And then into tomorrow afternoon is that heaviest threat for those significant thunderstorms. So let's take a look at watches and warnings and talk about everything that's going on out there. The first thing that I do want to highlight is the north coast. You will see that we have this color of green that's really out here throughout all of Humboldt and portions of Trinity, Mendocino, Lake counties. That you're seeing there is a flood watch. And that's for the weekend as we navigate significant rain. And that continues, all the way through your Sunday because we're going to pile things up. More immediately, though, here this morning, I'm recording this here at about 9:17, and we're headed pretty close to your high tide along the north coast. And so this extends up to Crescent City, Smith River, other spots along the Del Norte coast, as well as the Humboldt County coastline. This is a coastal flood warning, and that is not driven by, significant rain. This is truly about those king tides, right? We have a monster high tide coming up here in just about 30, 40 minutes that'll push water levels, well above normal. We're looking at a high tide of about 8.69 feet at the north spit of Humboldt Bay. So that's significant there. And again, you add in those rain concerns over the weekend. So that's why we've got that flood watch. So coastal flood warning through noon today, flood watch through the weekend. In blue, you've got a winter storm watch. That's out there for northern Trinity County, as well as much of Siskiyou County, starting tomorrow and carrying through your Sunday. So this is not a winter storm warning. It's a step below that. We're keeping a close eye on things. And again, that is for areas above 5,000 feet. So I want to make that distinction very clear. You might see Mount Shasta City and go, okay, we're talking snow. You might see Weaverville, Trinity Center and go, oh, we're going to get snow. You really probably won't. Those communities are almost certainly going to see little to no snow impact out of this storm system. But 5,000 feet and above, you're going to run into some significant snow issues. So that means that maybe you do see, some trouble out there at Snowman Summit, or maybe you're talking about Scott Mountain Summit. You're headed up Highway 3. You might run into some trouble there. That's where you want to kind of keep your focus when it comes to snow impacts there. Shifting you over to this pink stretch from basically, Whitmore area, or at least the higher elevations of eastern Shasta County, all the way down the Southern Cascades and the Sierra Crest continuing further south. That is a winter storm warning. So that's a step up, and that starts at 10 o'clock tonight. We know, hey, we are absolutely expecting winter storm conditions. Now, that is also really focused above 5,000 feet. So if you're in Shingletown, if you're out there in Manton, if you're in Whitmore, all these places that we talked about, you're not going to see this as a major snowstorm, but you are going to probably feel those impacts if you're somebody who travels through some of those higher passes in that area, right? We talked talk about all the difficult travel on Highway 36 and 32 there in eastern portions of Tehama County. You're going to run into trouble around Lake Almanor. I think Chester is a place where we could see some snow, especially on Sunday, but you're really looking at the higher passes on Highway 44, 36, 89, if you can even drive any of it this time of year. That's where you're really going to run into the most trouble. So again, this is above 5,000 feet starting tonight, carrying through your Monday winter storm warning there. In the valley, you're seeing this tan color, and they're not the only place with that tan color. We've also got that out along the north coast, and that is a wind advisory. So we are concerned about gusty winds. That picks up tonight and carries through into early Sunday for the valley, starts this afternoon and carries through late Saturday along the north coast. So your timing on the wind varies a little bit, but the impacts are pretty similar no matter where we're talking about. Again, that's really going to be a big south flow setup for us for the next 24 to 36 hours, if you want to give a real ballpark on when those worst winds are out there. So now let's talk about those impacts. We're going to take a look at one of these forecast models for those gusts. These are those south winds. That's going to be what it is for just about everybody, and we are going to see some really strong winds surging out there. Now, I will give you a little bit of a kind of asterisk to put on this. The model we're looking at here tends to overdo things a little bit, but there are some things that I do like. So we'll talk a little bit about where you might see those strongest impacts and where some of these numbers might be a little unrealistic. The one thing I really do like is that it does put some pretty strong winds out there in the Shasta Valley. This is an area where those south winds are already getting ripping this morning, and I'd expect you to see 40 to 50 even stronger gusts, maybe up to 60 miles an hour in a place like Weed. So you have to be ready for that with those high profile vehicles. It's gonna get gusty. I also think I would flip those numbers in Eureka and Crescent City a little bit later this afternoon, because Eureka is pretty well sheltered, right? We're talking about these winds coming out of the south. And so this is going to run into Cape Mendocino before it runs into Humboldt Bay. Kristen says there's a hole in a roof. I hope everything slows down for you. That's a rough time to have that. So best of luck to your family. Again, we've got these south winds, so they're going to be running into places like Shelter Cove. They're going to run into Cape Mendocino, Honeydew. Those are going to be spots where you really feel it, especially some of those windward ridges. So if you're facing to the south and you are out there on the coastal ridge tops, that's where things might get really gnarly. We have a weather station. PG&E has a weather station out here on Mattole Road, right out on Cape Mendocino, and that's an area where we have, in recent storms, seen gusts up towards 80, 90 miles an hour, and I think that's not out of the question. But in our communities, most of the maximum winds are going to top out closer to about 40 to 50 miles an hour. And that really does start to show up this afternoon, maybe 30 miles an hour in the valley, stronger overnight. By midnight, things are going to be whipping out there. And so you are going to want to make sure that you are prepared for maybe a power outage. If you have to get up early tomorrow, make sure you charge those devices ahead of time. We might see some overnight power outages with that potential for gusts up to maybe 40 miles an hour for a lot of folks. Now, what I mentioned about why these winds are a significant concern for us is that it doesn't really slow down, right? That cold front sweeps through overnight. We've got a really heavy rain early on Saturday. Okay, we're done and dusted, right? We're just going to let it go after that. But that's not the case. Those strongest winds are out there in the first few hours of your Saturday, and then they pick back up again into the afternoon. And you see another chance at 40-mile-an-hour gusts across much of the region. Along the north coast, that may be even stronger. Do I think 60 miles an hour is where we'll get to in Crescent City? Probably not. But 50 miles an hour, absolutely within reason for your Saturday. So Friday night through Saturday, very, very windy across the region. We do see some modest improvement into your Sunday, but it is still going to be a breezy setup out there, and you're going to need to watch for that. And by Sunday, we're starting to cool things off, right? Those north winds that you're starting to see filter into Humboldt and Del Norte counties, that's a little bit cooler air. That's going to help us bring those snow levels down, and that's one of the things we'll talk about here in just a moment. But I want to get into those thunderstorms first, because that is a big, big concern for us. You see this here for today. The Storm Prediction Center puts out this outlook, and they paint a big, wide area of concern. And so that starts out there, really all of Del Norte County, and then it starts to expand, and you could run into some trouble all the way up to the Sierra Crest once we get down towards, Butte County and onward further south. So there's a big swath of area that could see thunderstorms. But what you need to note is while this says today, it's really more so about tonight. And when you look at the graphic, you notice those little stars there behind the clouds. That's the time frame, is that it's really going to be 5 p.m. onward through the early hours of your Saturday that we're talking about this particular thunderstorm threat. Now, these are your garden variety thunderstorms. They're not going to do anything crazy, but they could bring us some brief downpours out there. Certainly plenty of lightning. And of course, that lightning is extra visible when we have these storms in those overnight hours. You could get some gusty winds out of it. All those things possible through the night tonight. So that's what you got to watch for in terms of thunderstorms for your Fridays. Mainly those evening hours onward into early Saturday. But Saturday is where we really turn the dial up a little further. You can see that darker green showing up on the map for communities right along the north coast. That continues again from Smith River all the way down the Mendocino County coastline, and then we pick that thread up again in the valley. This is a marginal risk for severe thunderstorms. And again, not super likely, but you do have that risk of maybe a severe thunderstorm in your vicinity. What are we watching for here? Well, we have a pretty unusual setup for ourselves that we get only a couple times a year where we have significant instability, right? We have that cold front pass through. So you have some colder air aloft, and then you've got lots and lots of moisture, and then you get some daytime heating, and that's when we start to really combine the ingredients. And so this is one of those, kind of several times a year type of thunderstorm threats for us where we could see these organize into a more severe thunderstorm. Amy says the tide is high, the moon is full. Yep, all these things are working together in conjunction. I know that out at the North Coast, it seems that we always get crazy weather when we've got king tides or after an earthquake or whatever it may be. It all likes to flow together, and that's kind of how things are happening this weekend, is that you are going to see, gusty winds, strong rain, king tides, and these thunderstorms that we're talking about. So your primary time for concern is going to be into the afternoon for that, potential severe thunderstorm. What do we get out of those severe thunderstorms? Well, we might see, of course, the usual threats, right? Lots and lots of lightning. You can get some really gusty winds. You could get some small hail out of that. And we also talk about the slight risk for, really turning that up a notch. So I'm going to flip the camera back to me. Hopefully it's not too zoomed in. It is. Want to talk to you for a second about what I mentioned on air this morning. We said there is a 2% chance of a tornado in the area. That's the forecast from the Storm Prediction Center. Now, what does that mean? 2% chance for the area. They put out this map and they'll say, okay, this is the area in which there's a 2% chance of a tornado within 25 miles. So it is a broad area. It doesn't mean it's going to be right in your backyard. And also, we're talking about 2% chance. Very, very unlikely. But there is that setup where we have just enough of the ingredients where maybe that could develop. So along the north coast, you're watching for some waterspouts. Throughout the valley, you're watching for the potential for a tornado tomorrow. We saw this happen last year, right? It was a very weak tornado, but it was the first tornado in the country right around this same time. It happened out there in eastern Tehama County. So we could see the same thing happen again. You need to be watchful throughout the day on Saturday for some of those storms to maybe develop into severe thunderstorms. Maybe we can get a little rotation on that, and maybe that does end up being a low-level tornado. But again, this is a very, very minimal risk. I don't want you to think that we're saying this is going to happen, but you just have to be ready. So when you have that potential out there, what can you do? Don't panic. Do not stress today. What you need to do is make sure that you have multiple ways of getting weather information. Now, really good advice is just make sure that you're inside tomorrow. Do something fun, indoors, cozy, relaxed, right? Try not to be driving around too much. Just try and settle in. And then again, just have multiple ways to get that weather information. We have our free KRCR weather app. That's great. You're going to get notifications from that if there are weather impacts in your area. So lean on that. That will notify you right away. But also, don't just trust us, right? Get multiple sources of information. Check the National Weather Service. If you have a weather radio, that's a great resource. All of these things, very important to keep in mind as we head into a day where there may be some severe thunderstorms. And maybe it's not a tornado. Fingers crossed that it's not. But if it is, even just a severe thunderstorm, you're going to want to know that. Know when that's rolling through your area, and that's why multiple sources of information are important. So I'll get off my soapbox, flip you back to the computer now. We're going to talk a little bit more about how this plays out kind of hour by hour over the next 48 hours and get you through your Saturday. So if I can get this to zoom in, bear with me for just a second here, and we will try to take a look at that thunderstorm outlook and how it plays out in real life. Now, the model we're looking at here is the HRR, the High Resolution Rapid Refresh. And so this is one that has really fine level detail, handles it pretty well, but it does overdo that moisture sometimes. So that's something to keep in mind, as it might paint a little bit too much rain, a little too heavy in places as we go through, but still, the overall picture is pretty good. So it does have those showers that are out there over Shasta, Trinity, and Siskiyou counties this morning, right? We've seen a lot of light rain out there, and that's really all you can expect through the daylight hours. As we get towards 4 p.m., it's starting to get a little gloomy out there, still plenty of cloud cover for most folks, but we're kind of winding down this first storm system. The next one is just around the corner. Here's 5 o'clock. You're starting to see that heavy rain just offshore, and our winds are starting to pick up accordingly, right? As the center of that storm system gets a little closer to our coast, we're going to start talking about getting those winds stronger and stronger into the night. And here we go into your dinner hour and onward to 8 p.m. Widespread rain out there at this point, mainly in the form of just true showers, right? We're not talking about thunderstorms thunderstorms until we can get a little bit more of that forcing, a little bit more uplift with that cold front coming through. That's when you typically see thunderstorms. And so it may take a couple hours. It might be steady rain for a while, but as you're heading to bed, things are starting to get a little bit more unstable, and you might start to see those thunderstorms rolling along the north coast, maybe 10, 11 o'clock tonight, maybe into the valley a little bit later. Snow levels are pretty high at this point. You're not noticing a lot of blue or even pink on the map, right? We're keeping snow levels generally around 5,500, maybe 6,000 feet out there through the night into early Saturday. So pass travel should generally be okay into early Saturday. But again, I'd advise you to just stay home, stay cozy if you can. Not a great weekend to be out driving at all. We are getting into your early Saturday. You've seen a lot of that heavy rain shift off into the eastern high country. We're seeing some good snow for those areas above 6,000 feet, but we're also seeing some showers tracking into the north coast. And you may see those nocturnal thunderstorms at any hour all night. Really going to pick up that thunderstorm threat later into the morning on Saturday, though, right? We're seeing a ton of moisture still out there, and we've got really unstable air. Unstable air wants to rise, and it rises rapidly, and we get these towering thunderstorms, and that's how we get that potential for lightning and the potential for, severe gusts, hail, etc. It all comes with that instability that we introduce as that storm system sweeps through. So enough technical language. What does it look like here? Well, it looks like we're lighting things up like a Christmas tree. 10 a.m., lots and lots of thunderstorm potential along the north coast. Will it look exactly like this? Probably not, but that thunderstorm potential is out there. And again, you're watching for maybe some isolated waterspouts, at least some special marine warnings for our coastal folks. Definitely not a good Saturday to break the boat out of Crescent City Harbor. So that's what we're seeing is a very messy morning there. And in the valley, notice that you have a couple sun breaks. That's something that we'll have to watch closely, right? If you see a little sunshine in Red Bluff, you're going, oh, we're in the clear, we're done. Do not think that way, right? We are adding a little bit more instability because that winter sunshine warms the ground and it gives that air just enough pop to lead to some thunderstorms a little later down the day. So we are going to see that potential for some strong thunderstorms to roll through the valley kind of mid-afternoon is where a lot of these forecasts put that timeline for your Saturday. Be ready in Redding, in Chico, Red Bluff, Willows, wherever you're at, be ready for some thunderstorms kind of midday tomorrow. We'll continue to see strong, heavy rain push through the region overnight into your Sunday, and snow levels are a lot lower, right? You're noticing more of that blue out there. We're starting to talk about maybe seeing that snow level closer to about 4,500 feet, aka down to Chester level by the time we hit Saturday night. And so that's why I would say if you have past travel that you need to do it today. If you can't do it today, do it tomorrow, safely, slowly, carefully. And then if you can't do it after that, you're going to really need to make sure you're checking up on those chain checks because things are going to get messy into your Sunday. Those snow levels are going to drop lower, and all of a sudden we're talking about lots of chain restrictions out there over some of those highest passes, particularly out to the east. This is why it's a winter storm warning. Now, let's take a look at snow estimates. What are we talking about through the weekend? Not a ton for most places, right? I think on the very high end, you could get a little dusting in a place like Bernie or Shingletown. Mount Shasta City has that slight potential, but again, you're at about 3,500 feet in elevation there. We're really focusing this snow above 4,500 feet in elevation, and truly, it's 5,000 feet that the real impacts are going to show up. So do I think we make it through your Friday, Saturday without any snow in these communities? Yes. It's Sunday where Chester might wake up to a little winter wonderland and continue to pile things up throughout the day with the potential for a couple more inches of snow as we head into Monday. And Monday is that slight question mark. Right now we look at Monday and we go, okay, well, this is a little bit intriguing, right? We have some cold air in place. We still have moisture. Could that snow level drop maybe down to 3,500 feet briefly in the morning? Could we get some snow down to some of those higher elevation communities, be they Bernie, Shingletown, Mount Shasta City, any of those areas? Maybe. Right now, I would expect it to be very limited if we were to get snow that low. But that is still a question mark, right? We're a couple days out, and that difference of a couple hundred feet in snow level is something that the models need to really kind of narrow down. But I would say set your expectations for snow levels generally above 4,000 feet through this series of storms. All right, let's take it back to the computer and hopefully take a look at some of those rain estimates. Maybe that's what you're looking forward to. If you're not in one of these beautiful winter wonderlands Wonderland snowy locations. And that's what we're seeing, is we're going to see a lot of folks dealing with rain. Now, like I mentioned, there is the potential to drop those snow levels a little lower into early next week, Sunday into Monday. That's that money zone where, hey, if you've got to travel, if you're headed from Bernie down into the valley on Monday, Hatchet Mountain's going to be a mess, and you got to know that. So I would plan ahead for some snow impacts, some low-level chain requirements out there on Monday morning, even beyond what you see over the weekend. But use your Sunday setup. Use what you see from Caltrans on Sunday to kind of set your expectations for Monday, because again, those snow levels are only going to go a little lower as we head into that Monday setup. So let's talk rain. Here we go, right? Couple more showers here through the 9 o'clock hour, not a ton, and you'll really notice there's not a ton of rain even through 5:30. So your afternoon walk that you're getting out for, or that evening commute, not necessarily that messy. It's not going to be that bad quite yet. The heavy stuff is still just offshore. Punches in pretty good for the rest of the night, right? Some folks maybe get a half an inch of rain out of your Friday, mostly out of those last few hours of the day. But we're really looking at your Saturday to pump those numbers up. And again, on Sunday, continuing to add to those rain totals. I think much of the valley can expect at least 1.5 inches to 2 inches. I think a place like Redding should see a good strong run towards 3 or 4 inches of rain, especially once you add in Monday. But through the weekend, 2 to 3 inches is a good, healthy expectation there. Along the North Coast, 2 to 3 inches, also a good expectation. I think a lot of mountain communities are going to push that 2 to 3 inch rainfall, especially when we talk about spots that are facing out and really getting the brunt of this rain. So Paradise, even though you're not technically in the mountains, that is a place where maybe 4 inches of rain isn't out of the question. I think you could see some of the higher elevations of Tehama County out to the east really pack up some good rain, 3 to 4 inches there. And I think a place like Hayfork will probably do better than the models are showing. A good chance at 2+ inches, not only there, but in a spot like Weaverville as well. Now, I think Mount Shasta City, we're going a little bit off the rails, right? Sometimes the model struggles with resolving the terrain. Mount Shasta City is down in a valley. It is not on top of Mount Shasta. And so that rain total is probably going to come in closer to what you're seeing in a place like Redding. You probably set that expectation maybe closer to 3 to 4 inches there. And in Chester, again, you're kind of on the leeward side of the Sierra Crest, right? This is another thing the models kind of have trouble with, is there's a lot of mountainous chaos going on here, and Chester's down a little bit. So you're probably going to set your expectations closer to 2 to 3 inches rather than 4 there. But hey, look at Paradise as your spot to maybe see 4 inches of rain. Look at Crescent City, another spot that could be a candidate. That was definitely longer than I hoped to talk about this, so I appreciate everybody who stayed on. There's just so much going on this weekend, and hopefully you can go back and skip through and find the parts that are most relevant to you. But I really wanted to give you that detailed look at what's going on as we head into a very active weather weekend. Now, looking a little further beyond that, do we have more active weather beyond the weekend? Yes. Your Monday is going to be pretty darn messy out there. It's another storm system. We talked about those potentially low snow levels. There will be a lot to talk about even as we wrap up Sunday's chaos. Tuesday actually looks pretty dry. So you get through Monday, you get a little break. A lot of folks are going to deal with just a couple showers. It might even be a little nicer than your Friday here, a little less rain than we're seeing today. And then Wednesday is that last punch for a while. There are suggestions that, yes, we're going to stay fairly cool, but actually pretty dry, kind of starting next Thursday onward into the weekend, right? We go through these ebbs and flows. We get this troughing, we get this active pattern, and then we take a break. We take a breather, and that's kind of expected to happen in about 6 days from now. But through the next 6 days, things are going to be gnarly at times. You got to be ready for it. Cozy up with a good book, a good movie, whatever you like this weekend. Stay indoors if you can. Stay off the roads if you can. If you got to go out, check Quick Map. That's Caltrans, their Quick Map. Know before you go, right? They're going to have all the information on road conditions. They're going to have all of those chain restrictions that are out there. And it's been a pretty mild winter. We haven't had a ton of chain restrictions yet to this point. So you might not be familiar with, okay, hey, what does R1, R2 mean? Check those details there. It will absolutely save you a lot of trouble, and it might just save your life. So make sure you're careful this weekend if you're getting out. I appreciate your time. Again, I hope you have a fantastic first Friday of 2026. We'll probably be doing more of these videos as the week goes on, but I just wanted to leave you here on Friday with something to talk about this weekend at the dinner table, because it is going to be pouring on that roof while you sit down to eat.